So, good day and welcome to the Key to Learner Engagement Part 1, Planning Education That Matters Most. My name is Shayna Davis, and I'm an interprofessional educator with the Ontario Centres for Learning, Research, and Innovation in Long-Term Care, or Ontario CLRI, hosted at Baycrest. This webinar series was developed in collaboration with Extendicare Brampton and is brought to you by the Ontario CLRI. Leaders have asked us how to make real lasting change with education. We now know that leadership involvement is the key to significantly improving educational engagement and uptake. This is the topic we will be exploring today. The Ontario CLRI strengthens the quality of life and care for residents across the province and acts as a resource for the sector to enhance the health and well-being of people who live and work in long-term care. Our program is funded by the Ministry of Long-Term Care. While this work is supported in part with funding from the Government of Ontario through the Ontario CLRI, the views expressed herein do not necessarily reflect the views of the province. So before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. I added to the chat a PDF of today's slides. I'll add them again at the end of the session, and then I'm going to send them out afterwards as well. Also, this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on the Baycrest CLRI website. We are going to be doing some experiential learning today. We will be doing breakout rooms. We're doing chats, discussions. Everything in the breakout rooms will not be recorded. Finally, we're happy to answer any questions you may have. Please remember to write them down as we go because there will be question and answer periods at the end. So I'd now like to introduce you to our facilitators, Shoshana Helfenbaum and Daniel Galassier, who will be leading this webinar. Daniel is an interprofessional educator for the CLRI at Baycrest and has 13 years of physiotherapy experience as a clinician and preceptor in both the private clinic and geriatric hospital settings. Shoshana is an interprofessional educator for the Ontario CLRI at Baycrest with a background in geriatric social work, educational design, and research. Shoshana, I will pass it over to you to start off our session.
Hi, Shayna. Thank you. And hello to everybody. Welcome. It's a very special occasion for us to be together. For those of us who have met in different cities and towns but have not been able to get together for a while, we'd like to welcome you back. And to those of you who are joining us at the CLRI for the first time, welcome. We're really pleased to be building our community of practice again and to offer support and learning to one another today. So have a moment now and reflect on the question that we've put up as a way of launching our learning together. What are you excited about learning today? And I was laughing because a couple of people wrote anything but COVID, and here we were pressuring ourselves to make sure everything was COVID relevant, but don't go away. It's going to be fun. We have lots of things that are not COVID. How to adapt from in-person to virtual environment. Yes. Yes. Anything else that you would all like to add? Ideas, topics, approaches?
Engaging healthcare workers at this time, with this challenging time, very true.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like this one, to get a little bit re-energized about teaching.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, so re-energizing and relevance and engaging. Let's do it. What do you say? We have 46 seconds left. Who else would like to? Okay. I'm open to staying here or going on as you wish. What type of education is best for different formats? Email, in person? Okay. So again, adapting the approach is important.
how to work around the barriers implemented by technology. We'll touch a little bit on how we can sort of marry the idea of doing some in-person with technology as well. So hopefully we can touch on that a little bit. Good question.
And curating resources. I mean, we could spend every day all day. Anyway, so let's talk about what we can do today. We're going to work together on taking a new approach to using education to engage learners. This approach involves working together to create a path that's sustainable and beneficial for team members as well as the homes you live and work in. And that's really our key approach today, is that if you engage with learners to find out what's relevant and what they need, that is going to be your number one key to keeping them engaged. So we'll go into it more. So first, we're going to explore how to choose performance goals. Then how to choose education that connects those goals with actions and values that you can actually teach and apply. And then we're going to share a case study showing these approaches. So this webinar has been designed to prepare you for all education situations. And we're going to look at performance goals that matter most. We're going to look at education that connects your desired performance goals with actions and values that drive those goals. And we're going to learn from Extendicare Brampton.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shoshana. So now we're looking at the slide that says, first of all, hello, everybody. I'm really glad that you're all able to join us. I'm actually really happy to see so many out there and sitting in on this webinar. So thanks for joining us today. So the question here that we have is, we know how to support staff and which skills to sort of nurture and build can be a little bit challenging, particularly in long-term care within the staff. So, I mean, you add on the time constraints that come from COVID-19, and it just makes it all that much more challenging. So we were thinking here at the Ontario CLRI, how can we streamline or simplify this process? So one of the things we thought was you can take the approach of aligning your education with the overarching organizational goal. So to choose one of those most effective goals to support, you can ask yourself these 3 questions on the slide. Knowing that we might be looking at an organizational goal, can the goal be realized or achieved through education? Is this something that education can help support and come to fruition? Is it really particularly important for staff, team members, stakeholders right now in this moment? And can leadership encourage it, reinforce, and monitor the education and its changes to make sure that it can come to fruition and have long-lasting effect? So if we look at the next slide, one of the things that we can do, or one of the things that we can do as homes in long-term care, is we can look at EQUIP goals, or quality improvement plan goals, as some of the organizational goals that we can tie into with our education. And to do this, again, we ask some of those questions. You know, if you're finding it difficult to know which specific organizational goal to consider, I would say, ask yourself the question, is it meaningful now? Is it a measure of performance change so that you can actually see the changes in your staff versus a process change that might be something a little bit higher up? And is it driven by behaviors that can be monitored, encouraged, and reinforced by leadership? And what we mean by that is key behaviors that we know that the staff can demonstrate, that can evaluate the change through the training and the education that we give. And we'll touch more on that as we move forward. So let's consider a topic that's actually really quite current and applicable right now in long-term care. Sorry for all of you that said you want to talk about anything that's not COVID. We're going to talk a little COVID now. So something that's actually quite pertinent for most long-term care homes now is personal protective equipment, PPE, and the way it's put on, the way it's taken off, how to use it properly by staff. Is this something that the organization is accountable for? Most certainly. It's a high-risk issue. It's something that needs to be maintained and followed at all times. Can this issue be something that education can help on? Is it due to a lack of knowledge or skill? It most certainly can be. So it can be a valuable tool to use. Can it be an issue of values and attitudes? And what we mean by that is, can we change the way someone looks at the value and the importance of personal protective equipment, understands to look at it in a different approach and in a different light, to really say, this is something important. That's the value and attitude we're looking to change. Is it highly amenable to educational encouragement, reinforcement, and monitoring? So what we want to know is, can we see those values and those attitude changes take place? Can we monitor them? Can we reinforce them? Can we demonstrate encouragement when we do see them so that the staff feel empowered to continue? Those are some of the areas that we were talking about. So here's a question. Take a minute now and reflect. I would encourage you to write a goal that comes to mind in the chat. Now, which organizational goal comes to mind as we talk about this right now for you? As you reflect on this, we're going to post a few different considerations in the chat now, 3 little questions. Read through them and answer them in your mind. And if you don't mind, take a moment to write down 1 or 2 words for the 3rd question in the chat. I see some great ideas coming through. I love it. Fall prevention strategies. How we could all play a role in prevention and keeping people safe. For those of you who already got some ideas coming in, thank you. Now think a little bit on question 3. How can you measure this success? And it doesn't have to be right and doesn't have to be perfect. Just what brainstorms come to mind as ways that you might be able to monitor or measure whether people are demonstrating skills that would show how they would prevent falls or are taking part in strategies to keep safety up in the fore of their minds. You still have a little bit of time to do that. Think outside the box. I love the peer feedback. Peer feedback is such a powerful tool. And as leaders sometimes and as educators, we can really shape what that might look like. Great idea. Thank you, Naima.
And if we were looking for inspiration as educators, just the words playing our part, keeping everyone safe, these kinds of collaborative words really ask us to engage everyone in finding out what matters most to them and asking questions, you know, what's really going to bring out the best in your day and what's going to make things matter to you. Those conversations are really key.
I really like also, thank you, Shoshana, that someone mentioned supporting family members and how to engage family members. Such a key point is to be able to work as an entire team, including family, as part of the care team to make things move forward in a very smooth way. So yes, great suggestion there.
And of course, residents, as always. That's right.
There it is. I'm going to pass the baton on to Shoshana to continue on. Feel free to continue to write ideas into the chat as we move, but I'll just let Shoshana have a moment now.
Okay. So now that we have all these wonderful ideas, we get to the important skill of identifying which critical behaviors form the basis of these bigger goals that we're talking about: safety, infection control. So what are the critical behaviors within that goal that are going to help you improve and can be improved through education? So here are some questions to ask that can help you in the process of identifying critical behaviors for your team or key behaviors. One of them is, what are 2 or 1 sometimes key behaviors that, if done consistently, would actually lead to your goal being accomplished? If you take that list of potential behaviors, which one of those would be most critical in driving positive change? So usually there are like underpinnings that really make the rest go. And then of those, which ones can actually be affected by training? In other words, which ones are not a problem of learning, but have to do with lack of motivation or other issues that are process or policy related, they may not be so amenable to training. So leave those for now and change the ones that you can change through learning by doing education. So wonderful. Now we're going to take some time and space, a minute or two, for you to reflect on these questions in your own practice setting, and think about them and share with us. Okay, we are going to get ready now for a small group activity. So what we'll do, thank you for taking the time for that reflection, and we heard a lot about working together with learners, co-creation, co-design, and really engaging them. So now we're going to open up the opportunity for you to share your reflections with your peers who are also attending the webinar. In a moment, you'll be invited into breakout rooms to discuss these same questions with others, and the questions are now posted in the chat for you to see them clearly. We recommend that you choose a timekeeper once you arrive in your breakout rooms, and that you take some notes and ideas down or common themes that come up. So when we get back into the large group, you can post them in the chat for everyone to enjoy. See you soon.
Welcome back. See some faces joining us back from your breakout group. So hope you had some nice conversation there.
Okay, so we're back to the issue of adapting in-person to online. Yeah. So I'm curious about that one. What critical behaviors would you be looking for in your learners as you adapt from in-person to online? Consistency in PPE through rewards. Yes, peer and family feedback, audits, thank you. Digital literacy, so that's a way of adapting, isn't it? Helping people to actually be technically competent to transfer the skills they have, which are so valuable, into this virtual world we're living in. So it sounds like there's a role for us to play in helping to validate people that COVID is a part of reality, even though we don't want it to be. So that's really interesting. It's like, that's a paradox, right? Because how do you get energized about being an educator when actually part of that being energized is accepting how difficult it is to be energized? So I think it's really about getting together, isn't it? I think that's what we're hearing, a very common theme there.
And to go back to a comment that was made earlier in the chat, which I thought was wonderful, was how do we engage our staff themselves to find out what they want to learn about? So again, knowing that we're moving into a different medium, and sometimes it poses its own challenges. I think half the battle is if you get engagement from your staff because they're sharing with you what's really important to them, it gives you a great understanding of where their mindset is and how that aligns with what the needs are of the home. And it also gives you an idea of how you'll be able to reach with them and really say some change, take on, because it's going to be that much more meaningful to them, what education you bring forward. And so I really like that combination of that comment in combo with what we're hearing now and some of the strategies.
So I'm going to add to that, Daniel. I think it's so true, and something that I can leave you with as a thought before we move on in the presentation is that speaking to staff and asking them why they care about PPE or how it makes a difference to them to be safe, or how they relate to the importance of residents or families being safe because of their own families or loved ones. Making things really relevant can break the seeming differences between an organizational directive to wear PPE and the people that we live and care and work with needing it. Yeah, what do you think of that, Daniel?
Bringing in the relationship.
Yeah.
And that's the key, I think, I think that will be the theme as we move forward. And that's what I'm hearing from all of you too, is you're looking at from that aspect. So thank you. As a matter of fact, to sort of touch on that, it's very appropriate. it's so much more than just giving education and taking training, as I think all of you are probably keenly aware of. It's really, it's important to understand that just having the tools or even the educational programs, that's not the be all and end all. It's a good start, and that's helpful to how we live and learn in long-term care. But leadership involvement is actually the single most important key to making lasting change. Let me explain. Leadership can enhance staff experience, and by extension, that of families and residents, by encouraging, reinforcing, monitoring, and rewarding the performance changes that the e-learning or the education is intended to promote. And they can do that all the more so if they actually go about their way of doing it in a relational way that models the actual behaviors and values that the performance changes are founded on. It's the modeling of what you want to see modeled in the staff that you want them to demonstrate. And the data actually reveals that uptake is truly significantly improved when leadership involves themselves in this way. From educational uptake from only about 15%, as high as 85% of those will take on and sustain the educational practices that you bring on when you involve yourself in a relational way to support, encourage, monitor, and reward the changes that you want to see. So let's take a look at an engagement and educational implementation example. The next slide talks about 3 steps: plan, define, and decide. So how am I going to choose my education, and what's my educational implementation plan going to be? The tech terms for, let's break it down into reality. So when I'm planning, I want to ask myself, like we talked in the beginning, what is the key organizational goal that will improve my environment that I work and live in that I want to base my education on? For example, we could use resident and family satisfaction. Understanding what their satisfaction levels are is a huge one. Do stakeholders believe that this is important? Well, we know it's a corporate goal. We know that it's usually on most quality improvement plans as an issue. So yes, it's quite real and valuable. How can we measure this? A simple way is we can get a survey from them to come get their feedback. Now that we have a plan in place, we say, well, let's define what behaviors, 2 or 3 critical behaviors or changes in behavior do we want to see to sort of achieve these goals. For example, we could look at how proactive are they in their planning as opposed to reactive? How well are they demonstrating the willingness to actively listen to one another and to families and residents about what their needs are? Do we need to modify some of these behaviors? Well, we could look at the way that they transfer information to one another, if it's more specific and objective information sharing, not really using terms that are maybe derogatory or terms that don't really express the full need. That might be one way to evaluate. And then we say, how do we measure if there's a change in their behavior at all? Well, that's where leadership can really step in and start to observe. You can really start to see if you're noticing some of these behaviors and attitude changes. And that's when it really comes important into the encouraging and rewarding of those behaviors. So then we decide, okay, let's choose a subject for our education session and to support the behaviors we want to see. So for a lot of homes say, we already have small little huddles that we run in the home. They're already established and staff know it. We can incorporate some of our education into those huddles and make them relational huddles. We can review the options for existing training. Well, some of the existing training that you might look through your education say, I don't have anything specific for a need that we have, but we can partner, for example, with the CLRI and look at some of the training. Homes have partnered with us for a lot of our Team Essentials training. For example, Team Essentials C talks about engaging families in distress and how to relate in a way that's meaningful and compassionate. And then creating a plan for reinforcing and encouraging the practice change. Here's where the rubber meets the road. So leadership says, what are we going to do to really reinforce when we see the changes? We're going to have weekly check-ins with staff. We're going to have them share success stories about what's really working for them with each other. I noticed earlier in the chat, people were talking about peer support. Having your peers share their positive experiences with one another is an incredibly tremendous, powerful goal. So these are just some examples to put it into real practice. When you're thinking about education, plan, define, and decide. Shoshana, did you want to talk a little bit about this next slide?
I'm actually going to jump in.
Well, I like that, Shana. Welcome.
Thank you. So we want to learn a little bit more about you now. We are going to do 2 Zoom polls. Agnes, if you could pull those up. The first one, we are going to ask you to choose knowledge and skill areas that are expected of you in your role. And I'm going to give you about 90 seconds to do this. And this will help us understand you better.
And just to clarify, I believe when we say multiple choice, what we mean is you can choose multiple answers. So you can choose more than one. If you feel that 2 or 3 of them apply to you, feel free to tag as many as you wish.
Okay, I think that was 90 seconds. A few more if you're just getting your votes in now. If you can just wrap it up. This is helpful for us to see, and I can see there's a lot of variety here as well. So if everyone is done, Agnes, we'll close this poll. And we have one more question for you. And this is for us to understand what type of support we can offer you and what would be helpful. So thank you for answering that. And we have one more question for you. So the second question is, choose the top 3 knowledge and skill areas that would help you respond to the sector's needs while keeping current with trends in educational development. So a lot of these items have come from our conversations about responding to COVID and what is needed to help with that. And then others are consistently needed as educators. So just-in-time learning, I'm keeping it open because we don't want to influence anyone just for a few more seconds, but I'll say that just-in-time learning seems very popular. Virtual facilitation, which is definitely a learned skill. We know that here at the CLRI, right? We are learning. We are learning. And experiential learning is definitely important as well. So using experiential learning techniques to enhance learner engagement was the #1 knowledge and skill area that you could use to help respond to the sector's needs. So thank you so much for taking the time to respond to that. And then we can keep moving and go to our case history now.
Thank you. We have a special opportunity now. We have with us today 2 outstanding leaders from Extendicare Brampton, Hannah Oxenberg, Administrator, and Rosemary Crisp, Director of Care. These women have been our innovation partners over the last 2 years, and they have been co-creators and contributors to the current leadership coaching program as we developed it for Team Essentials, starting off with engaging families in care. So I'm going to give you a very brief history here and then let them present their case study of how their learning and application of the leadership coaching and Team Essentials curriculum in practice made a difference to their teams. So what happened first was we got together in 2018 when we heard from Hannah in particular that they were very keen on making sure that family satisfaction was a priority for them. We told them about the program we had developed and they agreed that they wanted to take things from great to greater, or good to great as the expression goes. So they chose specific critical behaviors, as we have told you about today. They identified effective and efficient information sharing, which is something you also identified in your goals a moment ago, and having an increased willingness for team members to participate amongst themselves. And then we came back a year later after doing that training to do a follow-up and reinforcement and help them with their coaching and mentoring. And they chose staff performance goals at that time, again, of willingness to participate, this time in information sharing. Having reflection on root causes, and some of you identified falls, that was also important for them. And also the value of proactivity. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to them. So Rosemary
Syndicate
and
Brampton are fortunate to have a team interested, seriously interested in learning, seriously compassionate, proactive, and skilled in information sharing. So what Shazana did for us was increase all of these skills. We used staff who are willing to and wanted to become the residents' families, which quite frankly are most of our staff. Staff were always ready to be the family's eyes and ears, particularly when they had enough time, which you all know is not necessarily what they've got. The staff are very proactive. Most of them have been here, certainly more than 60% have been here 10 years to 20 years. They're empowered by the leadership team to communicate directly, because that's how we get the best information and how everybody else gets the best information. It always works better if a resident talks to her PSW and gets an answer from them. But the PSWs in turn know who to go to if they don't know the answers. As for COVID, families were sent communication on a regular basis. At the beginning of all this, it was daily, and it was ahead of expectations. Specific communication plans were created proactively with highly distressed families, because we did have some of those as well, with good reason. The staff had to be trained again in the SBAR communication, which I'm sure many of you know has always been used as a nurse-to-physician tool. Well, now it's been shared out among the general staff, because it has helped the staff to streamline and highlight existing thought processes. Now staff share information in a structured way without thinking about it consciously, because it's what they do. Information exchange has become more efficient and effective with the use of this tool. To enable the staff to communicate properly, we decided they had to know their families, and they had to feel free at any level of staff to ask distressed families what they need and to feel reassured. Report new changes and discrepancies between provincial health info and local public health legislation. And there has been a lot of difference. There really has. Every day something new is coming out. Every day things are changing. So every day the biggest asset we have here is good communication between staff and families. And this system has helped to develop that. We empower increased staff confidence in their ability to communicate directly with families. There is no reason on earth why a PSW cannot answer a resident's question if she knows the answer. As leaders, we choose, support, and reinforce training that enhances existing skills and processes. There's a very real close relationship between the leadership team in this facility and the staff that are out there. We are definitely all in this together. So post your questions and Hannah can answer them. I've talked enough. Daniel, you may well laugh.
And I just have to say, Rosemary and Hannah, thank you so much for joining us on the call today and sharing that. It's unbelievably valuable to have a home share in real time what's going on with them. So I can, again, thank you so much. It's lovely to see you both. If you do have any questions for Hannah or for Rosemary, please don't hesitate to write them to the chat.
You know something? It wasn't a culture shift. it was a culture mix, because some of our staff come from a culture that is matriarchal and naturally produces self-confident women. Some don't, but because we have a fairly equal mix of everything, they all mix together very well and learn from each other.
That's beautiful.
So another question we see here on the chat is, can you describe what motivated staff to apply the training? Rosemary?
No, you answer that one. Come on, Hannah.
We're both masked here.
Were there any techniques, Hannah, that you know as leaders that you tried to do to reinforce that training that you found was helpful?
Yeah. So in terms of, I think a lot of it is just role modeling. So the leadership team here, they see that the openness and the techniques that we use when speaking with families, and they're very much so in line with the interactions that we have in speaking with families, meaning families know that they can come and just talk to us openly. Like, my door is always open, Rosemary's door is always open. They see successes as such, and they want to continue to do that. In terms of empowering them, we go around on a daily basis and let them know, wow, that's like excellent. So thank you so much for the conversation you just had with family X. It was so helpful to put them at ease. So daily reinforcement, reinforcing each other, highlighting each other's successes on an ongoing basis, including the meetings that we have, even going forward with COVID. They're totally interdisciplinary, so everyone's equal, and that just empowers them more.
Thank you so much. I want to keep talking all day with you, and perhaps we do have to continue. I hope that it's been very motivating to hear what Hannah and Rosemary have had to say and what they do on a daily basis. And we'd like to hear your actionable ideas. Daniel, did you want to make a suggestion?
I am happy to have anyone write in the chat right now some of the things. I just also want to echo that it's what I heard in your messaging, and just in the small things that you take the time daily, and that you look at from large matters to even small matters to demonstrate your thankfulness and acknowledgement, I think is the message I got. I know that's just tremendous to hear that, because I think sometimes we think we have to do something huge, and sometimes it's just in the small things that we do and the little things that we notice and are appreciative for. So thank you for sharing that so much to both of you.
Okay.
Stay with us. There might be more questions yet, but we hope that all of you can take a moment now and put your ideas, some ideas that came out of today in your small group discussions, and learning from a case study, in reflecting on what you might be able to do to make learning relevant and really connect and empower your staff. And that's a big way to engage in learning.
It could be as simple as a simple word that you think that comes to mind that you would say is one thing we would do. It could be daily communication. It could be, reinforcing peer-to-peer feedback. It could be anything that comes to your mind as something that you might want to do as an actionable idea.
I know an actionable idea. You can sign up for our next webinar, where we'll be talking about other things that you mentioned today, like online, virtual facilitation, or really next time when we get together, we'll discuss in a moment. I think that could be everyone's answer, we hope. So Shayna,
yeah.
to resolve resisted behaviors to learning. Yeah. So I think Sangeeta answered Georgina's question. What do you think? Just goes to show we're not the only experts in the room, right?
Far from it. I love listening in and reading and learning from all people that attend.
Exactly. You know, resistive behaviors usually have to do with negative motivations for the thing you're asking people to do, or positive motivations for not doing it. And it's only in having those conversations that you can learn what those are. For example, we learned that a lot of times over the years, we learned that some staff get in trouble, in quotes, in trouble from other peers when they do something nice for someone because the peers say, you're spoiling that person and I'll have to do it. But a simple conversation among the team members can help them come up with some standardization or a way to communicate that. So those conversations can be had so everyone unifies at a level above the actual behaviors. That's something I would comment on. Shayna, what do you think about going into the COVID care learning so that people have another moment to think about actionable ideas?
Yes, let's move on because we only have about 4 minutes left.
Yeah.
Can
Okay.
you speak to that?
Sure. We have a special offer for you. Besides Rosemary and Hannah, who were the best thing that happened to us today, we do have something we invite you to take advantage of. The generosity of the Ministry of Health in conjunction with the Ministry of Long-Term Care sponsored CLRI to be part of a consortium of healthcare organizations across Ontario in preparing training resources to onboard people of all backgrounds into long-term care. And this could be of special interest to those of us who have to go into facing shortages in staff over the next little while. How do you bring people who are willing into long-term care? Well, the two main opportunities we're sharing with you are an orientation to long-term care training that we have in our very own CLRI website. And the second thing, if you could please change the slide, is a virtual training platform for many disciplines to enter and receive information and training support to transition from their current roles into a number of different roles on the long-term care team. It was designed in response to the need during the pandemic for people to have a place to easily access whatever information or skills they needed to work in a different job within long-term care, or even to come from acute care, a different sector, into long-term care. It's about being part of team practice and also role-specific skills and information. So if people have been using their portal, they may even be doctors offering to be PSW.
Okay, I don't see any questions to Shanna and Danielle, so I'm just going to say,
Much everybody.
and we're going to say thank you so much for coming. Again, thank you, Hannah and Rosemary, Shoshana and Daniel. We hope you can join us at our next educator webinar. It's on November 25th, entitled The Key to Learner Engagement Part 2. And we will try and add some things that we talked about today in the following webinar so it's relevant for you and your needs. We have a number of ways you can connect with us, as you can see on this slide. And again, this recorded webinar will be posted on the website next week with the PowerPoint slides, and I will be sending out an email to all of you tomorrow with an evaluation survey. Thanks again so much for taking the time to join us, and we wish you a wonderful day.
Take care, everybody.